Hello, boys and girls. We're back again. We're still doing another episode, if you can believe it. Today, I am joined by the infamous Stan Efferding. What are you going by now? Still world's strongest bodybuilder and creator of the vertical diet, or do you have any more accolades to add to your name? Is that enough?
No, I'm just dad these days. Nobody cares anymore.
Yeah. So I see you've been having some fun. Is it Sin City Barbell out there in Vegas? Is that a new spot?
Yeah, I love it. I joined up with an old training partner of mine and partnered with him. So now we've got our own little place to train, and we open it up for memberships, 24-hour private club on Key Fob, and we're having fun. I started a little kids power hour on Sundays. I've got little ones, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, come in every weekend and squat, bench, and deadlift. It's been
Oh,
great.
that's fantastic. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. There's always that apprehension. I mean, I think it's finally dying along with women not wanting to lift weights because they want to get big. But don't lift weights until your late teens. You're going to stunt your growth. And I'm like, listen, I've been lifting weights since I was 13 and I'm 6'5". So if I stunted my growth, I would have been an ape. You know?
Yeah, I should have started earlier. I want to be 6'5".
Yeah. And if I could start it all over, I'm interested in your perspective of this. So when I first started lifting weights, I started lifting weights because, a girl I had a crush on called me Titty Boy at a pool party when I was 13. So I just wanted to lift weights and get big. And that's all well and good, but it's my opinion and my experience that you really don't have, as a male, really the hormonal predisposition to be able to put on a lot of mass until puberty, late teens. So if I could start over, I would have started with, of course, the big three, but just kind of everything I can, maybe starting with Olympic lifting, gymnastics, and calisthenics and things, and then go into strength and prioritize strength before trying to push volume and hypertrophy until my late teens. I think that would be the optimal way to introduce, youth into strength training.
Yeah, number one on that list is just making it fun. If you want them to do it consistently, and that was kind of my priority when I brought them in. Secondly, what the research suggests is that even the American Academy of Pediatrics says that weight training for adolescents is essential. They use that very term. It actually can help reduce injury in any other sport. So it's a foundational sport, if you could call it that. And it's very low in injury rates, less than playing on the jungle gym at the school for certain. And what we focus on most, or what the benefit that we get most from it, is really the neural adaptation, as you know. You're right, those kids don't develop an extraordinary amount of size because they just don't have the hormonal milieu available, but they get stronger just as a result of their nervous system getting more coordinated and learning to contract and cooperatively work together to manage those movements. And so that's kind of what we use it for: injury prevention, neural adaptation, and then just creating some sort of habit. And anytime somebody gets stronger, whether it's through neural adaptation or for absolute strength gains, they get faster, they can jump higher, and they can throw further. And that bodes well for any sport they participate in.
And then also, just kind of thinking out loud, the aspect, obviously children are growing this way as well. And they hit growth spurts and they lose coordination and proprioception because their joints and their lengths and the levers are always changing. So if you're able to couple strength training and, the repetitive coordinated movements of squatting, pulling from the floor, pressing overhead, along with as they grow, they're able to maintain and improve their coordination as their levers change.
Absolutely. And another big thing would be bone mineral density. It actually helps to load. We see girls in particular, junior high school, certainly in high school, and definitely in college, end up with some degree of osteopenia. And a lot of that comes from chronic calorie restriction and maybe an absence of calcium in the diet. But generally, it's from lack of loading. And running doesn't seem to solve that problem because you don't have any axial loading. It actually tends to decrease bone mineral density. We see that in a lot of track athletes who get shin splints and the like. And so that's the optimal time. As you know, you can only accumulate the vast majority of your bone mineral density in those adolescent years, and for women up till they're about 21, 22, maybe 25. And after that point, you're really drawing on that reserve. And so you want to build that up as significantly as possible. And obviously, any kind of axial loading weight training does that job.
Yeah, taking advantage of that window, that precious window,
Agreed.
21 and under. It's like, we sell loading and strength training to older individuals because, all those processes, the calcification of bone slows and eventually stops as we age. But you can delay that process and kind of keep it going as we age. But to think about that, you're in such a position to really fortify all the bones and connective tissue of your body while you're in those growth stages. Incorporating loaded movements during that period should be very beneficial, not only for when they're adolescents but into their adult years.
Yeah, so I look at it as the foundation, really. I think it's the first thing that you should incorporate into an adolescence program is some consistent resistance training and loading for all the reasons we've just discussed. I believe that it's probably kind of the most important piece. And from there, you can start working on specifics, sports specific type movements. Obviously, GPP is going to include some cardiovascular fitness as well. But once you have strength and cardiovascular, you can build on that pyramid by including, sport specific movements, run, jump, throw, and then specific sports after that, whether it's volleyball, basketball, soccer, doesn't matter. But it kind of goes in that order.
Yeah. And decreasing the risk of injury, like you said. I mean, we've all, growing up, we all broke our fair share of bones, legs, arms, wrists, because that's going to happen as we're playing. But if you can decrease the likelihood of that happening, and also probably decrease the recovery period if it were to happen, again, it seems like it's just winning across the board. It's interesting that it's kind of finally starting to become, like you said, essential, or before it wasn't recommended.
Right. And, I think another thing that's important is that in terms of that injury prevention component, weightlifting itself, as you discussed, does not stunt your growth, and doesn't have a high injury rate, certainly as compared to any dynamic sport, football, soccer, etc. And it seems from the research that the most common injury, somewhere north of 65 to 70% of injuries that are suffered by adolescents in the gym, are simply from dropping a weight on themselves.
Yeah. Both my big toes are destroyed from doing that.
Yeah.
It's been over 20 years, and they're still not right yet. They're still not grown out, but maybe eventually. We'll see.
Yeah, so it's the one thing we have to avoid. And so I set it up to be fun. What I do is I know a lot of folks, they get themselves all wrapped around the axle with perfect form. And there's a lot of question now as to what perfect form is, or if it even exists. And so obviously we don't want the kids to, boy, it's hard to even say this now because their form is so individualistic as to, anthropometrics, limb size, etc., limb lengths, and, torso and femur length. So a lot of folks will, they'll put kids under say maybe a broomstick or a PVC pipe and just obsessively, do hundreds of repetitions working for this presumed perfect form before they put them under load.
Yeah. What happens when you put them under load? That all goes to shit.
Yeah, and you're right. That's the point. Even with quote unquote perfect form, as you've prescribed it or you've determined it to be, because as I've just suggested, that doesn't exist. Once you put them under load, everything changes. So I found that kids don't enjoy that. They don't enjoy the over instruction and the obsessiveness with those details. And so I give them some basic.
Neither do adults.
No, you're 100% right.
And those that do go down that path, they end up becoming members of the paralysis by analysis group. And if everything's not perfect, they don't want to friggin' work anymore. Yeah. I think in context to that, and I'm sure you'll agree, I'm very sure you'll agree. I'm probably taking the words out of your mouth. There are definite don'ts. There are definite things you want to look for and avoid that are unsafe and will definitely eventually, if not right away, lead to injury. There are definite things you want to avoid. But when it comes to perfect techniques, there aren't any. It's so individualized. And it's just a matter of teaching good patterns and getting people to understand how to safely manage load. And the stuff in the textbook is not going to apply to everybody or anybody.
Yeah. And I think my point with that, in terms of making it fun and not obsessing over by over instructing, I just set it up first and foremost to be fun and then safe. And so I put some spud straps in the squat rack so that they could just squat down partially. And I'm not a huge fan of partial reps, but when you're starting a brand new kid out, you just put a bar on them and tell them to go down halfway or, quarter squats. and they bang into the spud straps, and then they press it up, and then they do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again. They actually enjoy that. Initially, of course, they're like baby giraffes, and they're very uncoordinated, and their feet move around, and they stand up with the bar, and they relax, and then they wobble. But very quickly, they are in control of the weight, and then gradually, I just lower the spud straps so that they can increase their range of motion over time, and then once they can control a full squat, I can start adding a little bit of weight. But it's a natural progression that allows them to participate right out of the gate. I do the same thing with the bench press. I do a floor press using pins, and so they're only doing a partial press, and it just clangs down into the pins, and they just do pin presses off the floor. They don't have to balance on the bench. They don't have to worry about the bars smashing into them. And then we can start adjusting weight like that. And then the deadlifts, we just start with little kettlebells, and I just line it up by weight. If you can do 5 reps at a particular weight, then there's a heavier weight right next to it. Give that a try. And that's how we do it. And then each week when they come in, I remind them of what they did last week and see if they can at least meet that or beat that. And we just work on PRs.
Yeah. Is that the frequency, once per week?
Yeah, it is currently, just because it's kind of hard to get all the kids together. I encourage them to do some homework. Obviously, we'd like to see 2 or 3 times a week at that age. They'll certainly recover. They're not coordinated enough to lift heavy enough to cause any significant DOMs or muscle breakdowns, such that they couldn't do it every other day. So
it's skill development at this point. And I think what's nice and what will make it fun is if you're offering them in the onset, the first parameter that you're trying to overload is range of motion, they can see progress. If they know they're only going down so far week 1, then they're going down a little bit lower week 2 and week 3. That's very exciting. Training for guys like you and me, we're a little biased because we're meatheads and we just torturing ourselves, but progress is fun for anybody. Success is fun for everybody. So if you're able to show them in real time, like, hey, last week you went to here and now you're here, that they'll get excited about that just like anyone else would. And then eventually when you start slapping some plates on, the excitement will continue.
Agreed. And then if they're an athlete and their parents actually want them to do something significant because they're in high school and they're playing a sport, then, we talk more specifically about how to improve force production and to do so in a low fatigue manner. So I'm not influencing their sports training. And so we do a lot of box squats with an SSB bar for those folks. And we do some jumps, some weighted jumps. That's kind of the foundation of it. And from there, if I can increase their strength, then generally speaking, they can increase their 40 time and their vert.
Well, I'm inspired. It wouldn't take much to get something like that going here. I did have a couple of mothers that I train ask if I could put together a group class where for mothers, where mothers could come and take their young, adolescent kids in and do a group class with their young kids, get them involved. But I think another nice way to apply that would be just what you're doing, having small group, probably could handle between 4 and 6 kids per instructor and get that going along, just like you said, twice a week.
I've more than maxed out. I've got 20 kids in there now. I set up 4 squat racks, 4 benches, and 4 deadlift platforms.
You're running that by yourself?
I've got 24 kids, and I've got somebody helping the bigger kids on the monolift.
That's a lot.
It's like, brother, it's like chasing chickens. I gotta set up a second hour. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well,
I never expected it.
It's definitely keeping you young, I'm sure.
Indeed. Yep. It got real popular real quick. The kids loved it. They all come back. We have 100% attendance, and they're excited. The parents are telling me, the kids are like asking me when the power hour is again. They're looking forward to it, and that was the goal of the whole thing. Anyhow, just make it fun.
Yeah, they're probably starting to see their kids watching weightlifting videos on TikTok rather than foolish dance and all that garbage, which is nice.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. I mean, we're obviously a little biased. We live and die by this. This is our thing. This is what we do. But it's great to hear that you're getting young kids excited about it at such a young age, and that they're as into it as they are. So that's great. It's a great thing you're doing. Next order, you've done probably countless podcasts talking about the vertical diet and things like that. So we'll kind of leave that out, but I'm very interested. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the world's strongest gym competition you're putting together this at the Olympia. kind of the specifics on that. I've already communicated it to a handful of other gyms and people around here, but I think this will be a great platform to get the word out and cover any questions people may have about the specifics of it, because we're really excited to be a part of it, and I think it's going to be a great thing.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I've always enjoyed the animal cage at the Arnold. I've been in and lifted for those folks many times. And it's always to me, it's always kind of the centerpiece of the Arnold was to go and lift there or watch the lifters come. And it's always kind of highlighted, obviously the most popular or the strongest or the best lifters, the guest lifters that would come in and do these monstrous lifts. And so I want to do something a little different at the Olympia. And so I've got the Rhino Cage. It's going to be 3,000 square feet. It's going to be both days, Friday and Saturday, all day. And what I wanted to do was bring in maybe the lifter who isn't so well known, or the gyms who aren't represented, or well known. So I set it up to be a world's strongest gym competition. And in order to make this entertaining and a little easier to run, the gym was going to bring me 3 lifters, 1 bencher, 1 squatter, 1 deadlifter. And we're going to add their total. And they're going to come in. I'm going to have 4 teams in the cage at once. And they're just the 4 guys from 4 different gyms are just going to work up to a max squat. And we're going to record that total. At the same time, I'm going to have a bench press going, and 4 guys are going to work up to their max bench. At the same time, I'll have the deadlift going. So all 3 lifts will be going at once. We'll have 4 lifters on each, 12 total in the cage. They're just going to warm up and work up just like they would in the gym on a regular day, but work up to a top single. We'll record that single, add the total, and that gym gets the total, and we'll see who at the end of 2 days has the highest total. Friday's going to be repetitions. We're going to have a mixed team. 1 man, 1 woman, one over 40, 1 master.
And the over 40 can be male or female.
Male or female, yeah. And obviously, I think the men will do 2 times body weight, and the women will do 1.5, if I recall. And we'll have them warm up, set up a bar. We just weigh them right there in the cage, and then whatever 1 and 1.5 weight is, they go and rep it out as many as they can get. And of course, they get to pick which exercise. The man could do the deadlift, or the man could do the squat. The woman could do the bench, or whatever. The team decides. And so Friday will be a mixed team: 1 man, 1 woman, 1 master. And it'll be repetitions based on body weight, and we'll total the highest number of repetitions. Saturday is your best lifters. That's going to be your biggest squatter, biggest bencher, biggest deadlifter. But we're going to have 2 prizes, 1 for Wilks. And so some of those guys who have a real good lift by body weight can win the Wilks prize. We're going to give $2,000 to the Wilks winner, $2,000 to the overall highest total winner, and $2,000 to the reps people on Friday. So it's going to be exciting. And then, guys can travel here from all over the country, join, come to the Olympia and just put in a great hour of lifting with, a bunch of other lifters, put up a big number and represent their team.
Yeah. That sounds great. And a little bit of strategy involved to it. From what I understand, as a gym, your total team could either go for the highest total or the Wilks total. Not
correct.
So you put together 2 teams, so you pick one.
Yeah, you can pick one, or maybe you win both. Maybe you're that good.
Yeah.
We're going to have Eddie Cohn come out and judge. Grant Higa is going to be the MC, and we'll certainly have a lot more people joining us along the way. It's a huge area, like I said, over 3,000 square feet, and so we'll be able to have a lot of participation.
I feel like that kind of I can't think of any other questions. That pretty much covers all of it. So when it comes to each lifter as they go, so let's say day 1 on Friday, the rep, how long does each lifter have at their appropriate station to warm up and execute their air?
They've got 1 hour, just like they walked in the gym. They got 1 hour. They're going to warm up. They could get there a little early and do their foam rolling and whatever, strategy they have to get warm. But as far as touching the weights in the cage goes, every hour on the hour, we're going to have 4 teams jump in there with 3 lifters from each team. So 12 total lifters in the cage.
And starting just same for Saturday as well. You get an hour.
Same for Saturday. It's just like you'd work out with 3 of your buddies. Bar 135, 2 1/4, 315, 405, 495. We're just going to keep climbing all the way up. I got a monolift that will handle the squatters with, and I've got a elite, competition bench for the benchers, and we'll have a floor.
As far as gear, what are you allowed?
Yeah, belt and sleeves. It just takes too long to do knee wraps and suits, and so we're just gonna do belt and sleeves.
Great. Any just particular like IPF regulations, like 7 millimeter knee sleeves and the proper belts and all that?
Yeah, I suppose so. Now that Inzer came out with those monster knee sleeves, we should probably make a distinction as to some federations' rules to so everybody knows how to comply.
Yeah, I got a
I
pair of
intended it
Injers.
to be kind of
Injers,
fun.
yeah, it's not going to be pretty lax, but yeah, I got a pair of Injers. They're great. The first couple of times using them, they feel like wraps, but then as they break in, they definitely give a little more pop than my traditional SBDs do. But I use both. If I'm like doing 3 reps or above, I'll probably throw on my SBDs. If I'm
Yeah,
3 reps or under, I use my Injers. But now my Injers are so well broken in that I can use them for high rep stuff too, and they feel great. They
that's
definitely
great.
offer a little more pop, but it's not ridiculous like people might want to make it seem. As far as barbells, what Texas deadlift bar,
Uh, yeah,
and then will it be a competition squat bar, like a 55-pound squat bar?
I think so. My guess is we're going to get some guys going north of 800 plus 900, and we'll probably need it. So we'll have a 55-pound competition bar.
Calibrated plates or normal?
But
Listen,
we're going to bring,
I don't give a shit, but you know the powerlifters out there need to know this stuff. Of
I've got enough calibrated plates to handle the squat, but I don't know if they're going to be necessary for the bench.
course, yeah, and then the deadlifts too.
Yeah, so I do have calibrated plates for the squat.
Yeah, that sounds like an epic event. How many gyms do you have? Anybody aside from me that are definitely going to
Oh,
participate?
a lot of interest. Yeah, Bart Guan, Jesse, Mark Bell, all the standard folks that I communicate with. They're all interested in coming down. So, and there's a lot of gyms I'm not familiar with that are really excited about it. So we'll just it's open to anybody to join. And once we get our 32 teams, that's all we got room for. 4 teams an hour, 2 days. So
Yeah. How many teams you say was the limit?
I think we'll be able to do 32 teams because it's
32. That's right.
8 hours a day. What did I say it was?
4 teams on the hour, 3 teams on the hour.
Yeah, it's
Or would that be 32 if you
four
have 4 lanes?
teams on the hour. So it's 32 teams each day. The gym can decide to enter both or one or the other. It's kind of their decision. But if the gym wants to enter both days, then I can only handle 32. So 32 gyms.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting to think, being the first year, where the bar is going to be set. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of, obviously well over 2,000 pound totals for the powerlifting, the total one. I mean, pretty sure if myself, my buddy Nico, and probably be Manny for the bench. Manny's got mid fives, low fives. I'll probably deadlift because Nico's stronger than me in both deadlift and squat, but he's got a lot more on the squat than he does on the deadlift. So he could probably squat close to 9.
Wow.
I'll deadlift close to 9. So that's 18. So that's a 2,300. And that might be competitive. I mean, we'll
Yep.
see. I'm sure there's plenty of gyms out there that have 3 guys that are putting up big numbers. So I mean, the sky's the limit.
Yeah. And that's what I want to know. And that's what I want to see. It's time that the gyms are represented. The individual lifters, of course, are really popular and it's fantastic to watch them. But I'd like to see some credit to the gym owners to bring a team out. And I'm kind of more excited about Friday. I want to see the mixed team and the reps, to see
Yeah,
kind of depth that these gyms have.
that offers a little more strategy as well because you have to
Yep.
fulfill the male, female, and master. And the thing with reps, top end strength is top end strength. But the thing with reps, especially when you're at what would be considered a comfortable resistance, I do a similar thing here. I've done relative strength competitions and I have the top strength record board, and all of which have male and female AMRAPs as well. And the female, I think it's safe to say that women, generally speaking, in that threshold, can suffer a bit more than your average man. I saw there are 2 women, Vanessa, who you met, and Marissa. I'm not sure if you met, but Vanessa, not she's more conditioning. She's not much of a strength athlete, but she deadlifted her body weight, I think, close to 80. And then Marissa came in a couple weeks later and she did 101. But what was so obnoxious about Marissa's attempt is like 15 to 20 in, I was like, oh, she's just about done. You know, you could see her form was starting to deteriorate. You could see the fatigue. You could see the grimace in her face. Then 21, then 25, then 30, then 40. And I'm like, this bitch isn't going to fucking stop. And I know
No.
in her head she had 100. And you know, you could just see she was suffering, but she just kept going, kept going, kept going. And then she hit 100, and then she pulled one more just as a fuck you to all of us
Yeah.
watching. Unbelievable. And I think, like you said, I'm excited to see Friday too, because there's just such a, you know, there's just such a large variant in who can go to that place and just stay there and just keep crushing reps.
Yeah.
So
That's definitely a fact that women have more endurance. And
I
I
think they
always,
first started to see it in swimming, in distance swimming. Women
yeah.
were able to really handle themselves in the water for much longer and suffer much longer than men were.
Yeah. And you got to remember, those ladies, women have babies.
Yeah.
Deadlifting is not a problem.
What were the weights? So the AMRAP weights. So men, is it double body weight
I
squat?
think it's going to do double body weight. I was trying to avoid the 100 rep sets, and so I kind of wanted to make it challenging enough. So 1.5 for women and 2 times for men.
And then for bench,
I think we're in the same ballpark. I got to pull it up and remember what I said first.
I think what we did here is
it's on the website. It's worldsstrongestgym.com.
Oh, great. All right, cool. I'll make sure to tag that link at the bottom of this video. Here we did, I think men did body weight and women did like 0.7, and that worked out pretty good. But if you were to do men to bench 1.5 and women body weight, I'm sure that'd be fine too. But that's a nice way to avoid those 100 rep sets. You'll be there all day. And you probably need a lot of puke buckets too.
Yeah. It's going to be a fun one. And the people like that.
Yeah, I think it sounds epic. I think it's going to be great. You're going to be rivaling the Animal Cage. But my first experience at the Arnold was a few years ago during the pandemic, and it was going to be canceled, but then it ended up being open at limited capacity. And I was very excited to finally see the Animal Cage. What ended up happening is the Animal Cage wasn't, you know, a lot of the typical stands weren't at the Arnold. So what would have been the Animal Cage ended up kind of relocating to this gym called Pinnacle. I think at the time Joe Sullivan was involved there. He was part owner. And I spent just about the whole weekend there. There was a 700-pound AMRAP between Joe Sullivan and Andy, Lord Strongest Asian, I think.
Yep.
And that was epic. I mean, Andy outweighed Joe by, I think, 80 or 100 pounds. And they were side by side, I believe. I think they were side by side. And I'm pretty sure Joe took it for like 7 or 8, and which was unbelievable for a guy that weighs 220, 240 pounds. I think Andy was just north of 300 at the time, and he took it for 10, or something like that. But it was super, super impressive, and that was really cool.
Crazy. Yeah, I can't believe those numbers. I'm glad I'm old, because that was these guys nowadays, the stuff they're doing is crazy.
So as far as your training, we'll talk about that for the last few minutes we have here. I've noticed you're doing some different lifts that I haven't seen you do in the past. I see you calling them bad mornings, those kind of heavy dead stop good mornings to the straps. Explain that for us a little bit. You're just trying to destroy your back, or what's the plan with that?
I'm actually trying to increase my deadlift. I'm focused on one lift now. I'm too old to focus on all 3. And so I bounce around based on what hurts the least. And the deadlift is something I kind of wanted to build recently. CT Fletcher wanted me to come down in January and deadlift at his meet. He has a meet every year, and he thought I'd be a guest lifter.
I just saw that. What's that called?
I'm not certain, but it's in January at his gym down in LA.
It's called like Iron Wars or something like that.
Something like that. But it's always a fun time. He's got a lot of great guys there. It's always really exciting. But he wanted me just to come down, just to be a guest and do a lift. Well, he wanted me to deadlift, and he asked me, he says, "You still deadlifting?" And I'm like, "Well, not anything impressive." I think I was struggling with 635 at the time.
Yeah.
I just hadn't deadlifted too heavy too often. It wasn't a priority. So I started kind of a deadlift protocol. And the accessories for my deadlift are the box squat, and the pin good mornings. That's how I'm trying to, and both of those are selected specifically because I think they transfer to the deadlift and they're lower fatigue.
They're both dead stop, similar to a deadlift.
They're both dead stop, which is huge. Plus, they're a little lower fatigue. You know, when you use that stretch reflex and you have to reverse the weight, a lot of that eccentric damage is done kind of in that change of direction. And so the box squat has been good for me. And then, of course, that good morning is, I crash those down on the pins. And so I'm not having this to decelerate and reverse the weight. And so I am experiencing less fatigue on those. And you're right, it's a dead stop position, which is, when you see me set up for those, sometimes I actually reach down as though I'm grabbing a deadlift bar and starting from that position. Nice. So, and they seem to transfer pretty well. I just pulled 700 last week after only about 6 weeks of focusing on those two movements and pulling twice. I pulled a real hard 675 that was a grinder. And then 1 month later, I pulled a pretty easy 700. So it's progressing for me, and I'll use them as long as it progresses. And then I'll, switch to something else as soon as I don't get the benefit out of them that I need.
Yeah. And also you can set your box height for your squats similar to the height that your hips would be at where you initiate the deadlift, which is something I've used in the past as well. I've always been a ROM snob, but I personally, I'm in a bit of an off season now until I get this arm fixed. And I'm using a high handle trap bar for the first time. I've never trained that because I'm always like from the floor or bust, but I can obviously manage much more weight. I'm also using a bit different of a high sternal position, knee over toes a bit more with the trap bar. So I'm getting more quad drive, more of an upright posture. And I'm still deadlifting from the floor. My other deadlift day is a pause deadlift with a barbell, and they're flying. So even though it's partial range, overloaded intensity, it definitely seems to be giving me more power off the floor with my traditional deadlift. Also, I think where there's just no forgiveness with a trap bar, there's no whip at all. It's just a really honest, true break off the floor. You don't get any give. So it doesn't, I have kind of a powerful, explosive deadlift technique, which has served me well so far. I probably may eventually go and have a bit more of an honest slack, tension in the future, but being obligated to use a very true, tight setup on the trap bar, and it's kind of slow off the floor, and then it flies once it comes up, which is the opposite, where normally I can get a really good pop off the floor with a dynamic deadlift bar, and then I fight to the end. So using that, I'm going to do 3 months. I'm about halfway through my second month of that right now. I have a 815 AMRAP next month, and if I can get 7 or 8 at 815, I think I'm going to go for 1,000 at the end of next month. We'll see if I can get it.
That's great. I'm embarrassed to talk about my numbers, but I have to remind people I have my AARP card now, and nobody over 55 has ever deadlifted more than 750 in competition. That's just kind of that's my benchmark. If I can get 750 at CT's meet, then I'll be happy with it.
That's fantastic. I just turned 35, and a bunch of my buddies here that I train with like, hey man, make sure next time you compete in powerlifting, you register as a submaster as well. You'll destroy all those numbers. And I said, I'll think about it. I don't know if I'll register for that or not. I'll do the open either way, but why not register for that extra class?
Sure.
It's available to you in powerlifting.
I think people should know what the real records are.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were working with Mark Bell, who are from what I remember, it was your resource when you were going for the world record total. I wanted to kind of get your insight and experience, because we just talked about how I'm doing, we'll call it like partial range. I've always kind of, been on the school of thought that when training, you should overload the weakest point of the link or the weakest point of the lift, because the weakest link of the chain is going to be, the limiting factor. So when it comes to squatting, I do a lot of pause reps, a lot of pause below parallel, double pumps. If I'm doing box squats, it's always been a box at or below parallel. And that's kind of always been my approach and understanding. And then also to improve my squat, I put myself under, different barbells that force a more upright, less hingy position, because I've found that if I obligate myself to use more quad, more of an upright squat, it benefits my low bar hingier squat without, training low bar year round, grinding and basically, assessing damage and stress to the same ligaments and same tendons and same musculature over and over again. Because what ended up happening is my back always bothered me and my knees always bothered me. So when I went to a front squat or a very upright SSB, and again, incorporating pauses and things like that, that seemed to remedy it. But like I said, during this off season for my deadlift, I've been using a high handle trap bar, and it seems to, even though it's a partial range, it's kind of like from a 13-inch, almost like what it would be a wagon wheel deadlift. It seems that it's benefited my deadlift from the floor. And I'm interested. So right now I'm using kind of a partial overload principle for my deadlift. And right now for my squat, I'm using front squats and high SSBs. So I'm kind of doing, lighter movement variations for my squat while doing heavier partial ranges from my deadlift. And I'm kind of thinking about flip-flopping it next time around, because if you look at like a lot of West Side, they very rarely pulled from the floor. They were always pulling from a rack and doing rack pulls, heavy rack pulls. And a lot of their squats were a higher box squat. Now, granted, most West Side is geared lifting, so they have the help of the suit with the squats, which kind of makes more sense why they wouldn't need to train to depth, because the squat suit helps you out of the bottom. But I'm curious, when you were training for powerlifting and also the training you do now, have you found, overloading partial ranges of the of course, block presses for bench presses, right? Tend to be heavier, shorter range of motion with more resistance. Do you find that carries over successfully to your big lifts?
Yeah, I would certainly do rack pulls, but I was careful not to go more than 10% over my max. I think sometimes people will try and pull too much over their max, but I would do rack pulls and then I would lower the rack. I would start lowering the pins week over week to try and get a little more range of motion out of that 10% extra. And other folks will pick up a heavier weight and walk it out and do a full deadlift, but do it with that from the top down.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Just so that they have the advantage of already being tense, right? Already being stiff.
Yeah. So often you'll see a second rep on the deadlift go faster than the first. The first one's a grind, and it's like that's all he's got. And then he sets it down and yanks a second. And you have that kind of stretch reflex and the tension from lowering the first.
And that's kind of why I'm doing the box squats and the good mornings, is because creating tension in the deadlift is a really big piece of getting that first rep.
Yeah.
And that's something that people, need to practice to be able to fire, to get yourself tense and be able to fire all those muscles as quickly as possible.
In the lowest,
stop.
most challenging, precarious portion of the lift, or the bottom, similar to like an Anderson squat or a pin squat. I think those are fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's also a great way to clean up the bottom.
In my strength book, I wrote a book, Strong, Stronger, Strongest. And I said, everything works, nothing works forever. And it's pretty individualistic. That's why I like to choose a couple of accessory exercises, and I like to progress them and then test and see if they transfer. And if in fact my deadlift goes up from utilizing those and I can keep progressing those and it keeps going up, I'll do that until it stops. And then it's time to select a different exercise and try and do the same thing.
Yeah. One of the first seminars I ever attended was Dan Green. It was at actually Poundstone's gym in Connecticut. And it was one of the first seminars I ever attended. I was very green. I had just started training, as my profession. And I just kind of started messing around, competing in powerlifting. This is probably 6 years ago. I wasn't even competing at the time. And it was such a great experience for me, because you had all these, brainiac exercise physiologists sitting there with their notepads, and they wanted to hear the secret from the amazing Dan Green, like, what does he do? What does he do? And he said the same shit you just said. He's like, for squats, I'll use front squats. And I'll use them until, they make my squat better. And then when they stop working, I'll take him out. And I was just sitting there with a grin, ear to ear. I'm like, exactly. And then, of course, all the people were writing it down, and they asked, what about bench press? And he's like, for bench press, I tend to use, close grip bench, and I'll use it, because it helps. And then eventually when it stops helping, I won't do it anymore. And I was just like, I love this guy. This is perfect. It's like, guys, just do the work. It doesn't need to be that concise and that, elaborate, just good quality work with intent, and see things through, and just kind of keep it as simple as possible. The basics work, and they always will. They're irreplaceable.
100%. And it is, you got to be persistent and consistent. And it's not just the lifting, it's everything, as we've talked about before, that goes with recovering from and preparing for the next lift. How disciplined you are outside the gym, eating and sleeping, and then you could get in and have another great bout. And if you could get 5 more pounds or 1 more rep, or you can move the same rep a little faster, that's a win.
Yeah, there's other ways to quantify success than just more weight. I think it's so important to understand that, and in training, especially for strength adaptation, there are so many other things that need to be focused upon and improved than just how much weight's on the bar. Like you said, speed, control, coordination, and all of that stuff needs to be practiced under submaximal loads. And then when the time comes and the most weight that's ever been on the bar is there, you're in a better position to be successful. And before I forget, when you first started talking about, partials and rack pulls and things like that, you said, I don't go much higher than 10% of my max. That's a lot. I mean, if you're a 700-800 pound deadlifter, that's 70 or 80 pounds. And it's if you're pulling 880 off a rack, I mean, that's heavy. And even relatively speaking, if you're a 300 pound deadlifter, if that's your max, 330 off a rack is nothing to, that's a good amount of resistance. I think 10% is a very fair window. It's enough. It's good weight. I think it's the right amount. Going more than that, you're definitely going to see some form degradation and some compensatory strategies if you go much further than that.
Yeah, and remember, it's an accessory. There's nothing I hate more than guys who will load up a rack dead, and of course we as gym owners know it's just going to bend your bars just so that they can lift something heavy. It's intended to be an accessory for a deadlift, and if you use it as such, I think it's a reasonable substitute. But the idea that is the lift that you're trying to grow all by itself.
Yeah. I PR'd my rack pull today. Yeah, no one gives a shit. And also, why not use blocks? Why not throw a couple mats down or a couple plates down, pull off those? It seems to make more sense from an equipment standpoint. And also, with the deadlift, you have the dynamics and the whip of the bar. It's going to feel different coming off pins than it is coming off the floor. So I think you're better off doing a block pull, or if you're fortunate to have wagon wheels, to use that for your partials rather than destroying a rack and making a bunch of noise.
Yeah, I remember when I was in my 20s, I was at one of these LA fitnesses up in Tacoma, Washington, and I took a bar and I set it on a bench press and loaded it up with 700 pounds. And I was doing partials off the bench press. And of course, that bar looked like a Duffalo bar when I got done with it.
Really?
I set it on the bench pad itself.
How partials were your partial 700 pound presses then?
No. This was a deadlift.
Oh, all right.
I used the bench pad, kind of where you have your where your the back of your thighs would be.
Yep.
And I was partially deadlifting off of that instead of even a rack. And of course, that bar looked like a Duffalo bar when I was done. And I think all the way back that now that I'm a gym owner, of course, I realize what an asshat I was. But that's the kind of thing that happens.
Yeah, and I just suppose that's how you learn. Hopefully, you just don't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah. And another alternative is you can put some straps on that might enable you to pull a little more off the floor than you otherwise would. And we give you that same kind of overloading that you're looking for.
Yeah. I also, when you talked about how you got, you really had to struggle for that 675, and you pulled 7 comfortably, you also brought your stance in a little bit.
Yeah, I just noticed, and I kind of talked about it on that post, that the way my hips are, I tend to walk a little duck-footed, and so my hips are a bit rotated out, And so, and I also kind of walk on the outside edge of my feet. My shoes always wear unevenly on the outside edge of my feet. And so now I set up for a deadlift, and
Like cater to that. You had your toes out a little bit.
yeah, my toes are out a little bit. My feet are starting. I'm on the outside edges of my feet. My knees are pushing outward. My hips are shifting. So you're not transferring the force directly from the floor into, through your body and into your hands and onto the bar. A lot of it's dissipating with the hip shift and the knee bowing and the feet rolling out. And so I saw a lot of wasted energy there. So just by chance, I was watching, Pat Davidson. I went to his seminar down in Florida. He's a pretty brilliant exercise phys PhD.
Yeah, we were down there with him and Jordan Shallows.
Yep. Dr. Pat Davidson, when we were all down there.
Yeah.
He made a post. It was a completely unrelated post. He was talking about doing hip thrusts, and how he kept his feet closer together and rode the inside edge so he could get more glute activation. And I was just like, there it is. I remembered back to the last time I pulled 765 for a double. And I remember, and I went and pulled up an old video from I don't know, it was like 9 years ago.
Yeah.
When I was doing a guest seminar at a gym, and my feet were directly together, pointing straight ahead, and I had no hip shift, and everything looked like it was transferring. And so I went and tried it, and sure enough, there was no leakage. This isn't a scientific term, obviously, but I'm just saying that I felt really sturdy and stable and strong, and I didn't have anything moving, any of the force dissipating laterally, and instead it was transferring right through my body, and I just felt very, very tight.
Yeah.
As though I could, pull damn near anything at that moment.
Yeah, the more pressure you can contain in the system, the more the power of your legs will be expressed into the barbell, and there's tons of places you can lead. I think the biggest take home for that, for listeners, is not everyone should bring their stance in. I think the biggest take home to that is how long have you been deadlifting, Stan? Ballpark.
30 years. Yeah.
All right. So 30 years. Okay. And the biggest takeaway from that for me, and I think for everyone listening, is to understand that we are all always students of this sport. Not even as far as like learning about new training techniques and new supplements and new exercises, but just the deadlift. We all individually are constantly scrutinizing every piece of our lift. So Stan's been deadlifting for 30 years. I've been deadlifting for 22, squats the same, bench the same. And all the time, over each year after year, I can look at what my squats looked like last year, what my deadlifts looked last year, and I can notice little changes, little nuances, little things that we adjust to get more out of it. My squat today and your deadlift today may not be the way that we deadlift in a year or so, because and that has to do with soft tissue adaptations and just how we adapt and how we evolve and how we change. We can always it's so important to always be a student of this and look through the fine print and try and find little leaks and little things. I'm assuming over time, as you developed, you started to become a little more duck-footed and you started to walk a little bit differently, and you very sensibly applied that stance to your deadlift. But then you noticed, hey, maybe I can get a little more out of it if I adopt this. And the take home shouldn't be, oh, we should bring our stance in like Stan did and we'll have the same success. I mean, maybe, but probably not. But the key is to always be under a microscope and try to make these small modifications and adjustments, even as the individual. I think it's so important to always be a student of this sport and each individual lift and all the small pieces that go into it.
Yeah, and kind of how we opened the conversation. Everybody's different. All your limb lengths are different. Your hip angle, the length of the trochanter, and the direction that it comes off of the femur.
Yeah.
The depth of the socket. All those things are different.
Some people's sockets are here, and some are open like this.
Some are deeper than others.
Whenever I hear somebody instructing a squat and they say, okay, walk the bar out, feet shoulder width apart. I'm like, this guy, just run. You know, it's just that it's you know, everyone has to move differently, especially when you look at a squat. Like you said, lever lengths. You have the skeletal structures and biomechanics of everyone's individual skeleton. The length of the trochanter, for those listening, you have the femur, which is the long bone of the upper leg, and then that has this kind of process called the trochanter that goes in to the socket. The length of that, the size of the ball, the angle at which that ball articulates within the joint is going to be dramatically different with everybody. And then looking at soft tissue, looking at, you know, muscles, everyone's insertion points are slightly different. And then over time with training, all of our muscles will develop and strengthen at different rates. So in order to leverage our own individual strengths and cater to our own individual weaknesses, there's dramatic differences in squat stance. If you go to any powerlifting meet and you watch the first 15 lifters, chances are pretty good you're going to see 15 different squats. It's the same lift and they're all trying to get whites, but they're all dramatically different. So it's so important to look to each individual as an individual, because there's a lot that goes into, you know, how they move and how to improve their ability to move more weight.
Yeah, and the way I squatted and deadlifted in competition is very different than the way I squat and deadlift today.
Not recently, but after we trained that day at Hybrid after that seminar, I convinced you to do some flat-footed high bar. I think we did. And then after that, I saw you were still doing some more flat-footed high bar. It was really nice to see, because you have a tremendously developed back. So you obviously leverage that in your squats as your deadlifts. You have a great hinge in your squat. And I saw you working a little more upright, getting the bar higher on your neck and trying to sit into your legs a little more. I'm sure that served you well. And again, it probably wasn't as taxing because you're not able to manage as much resistance, but you're still getting a great training adaptation.
Yeah, a lot more quad. I tend to be, like you say, a back, glute, spinal erector squatter, and historically even a lot of hips, but not a lot of quad. And so that one really bode well for keeping that load on the quads. And I would, then I started doing some belt squats if I wanted to minimize fatigue. At my age, it's kind of hard to keep banging away at some of those high fatigue exercises, where I could get my knees over my toes, really, essentially, and just kind of get more quads, more lengthened position in the quad.
Yeah, and
And
the
it's
belt squat.
it's kind of helped. I just, generally speaking, the bodybuilding really helped with the powerlifting for that very reason. You do
Absolutely.
so many different exercises from so many different angles with so many different foot positions and hand positions that you just don't have any glaring weaknesses to speak of.
Yeah, and also I think when it comes to bodybuilding, if you do have any injuries or issues, you can train around them. You know, it's no
Yeah,
big deal. You can train around issues and injuries and pain, because you're not competing in a specific lift. You know,
right.
if you're coming up to a powerlifting meet and your shoulders feel like shit when you squat, you still got to squat. You know, when
Yeah.
it comes to bodybuilding, you can choose different exercises that don't aggravate that chronic pain, so you have a little more leeway. But I agree with you tenfold. And that was really kind of the vision of this gym, is that I saw and personally experienced such overlap between the different practices, um, how bodybuilding for a period of time and focusing on mind to muscle connection and tissue damage and just building a physique can then be transferred and coordinated to improve your big three and vice versa. If a bodybuilder's in his off season and he kind of trains with strength in mind, strength being the primary driver of his training for a short period of time, he can get stronger and more coordinated and then apply that strength to his hypertrophy work and back and forth. I think being a little more dynamic and not so tunnel visioned and pigeonholed in your training can have tremendous benefit. And I also agree where, if I remember correctly, you competed in bodybuilding first and won, and then went into powerlifting.
Yeah, I was such a skinny kid. It took me damn near 10 years to get the strength to speak of to where I could get on a platform and lift heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the two different practices complement each other very, very well if you're able to approach each with the appropriate kind of mindset. I think it's the second or third episode I released on this podcast was strength training, and I called it strength training versus hypertrophy training, which it shouldn't be versus, because they accent each other, but there's a different mindset, a different approach that should be taken into consideration when you're training for strength, the coordination of the skill development of the movements versus hypertrophy, where you're just trying to really isolate a specific tissue and break it down as much as possible to force a growth response. Where with strength training, you're trying to coordinate everything, and then hypertrophy, you're kind of trying to isolate everything. And with that, when you work in hypertrophy, you see a lot more machines and constraints kind of come into the fray, because without a doubt, you can toast your legs and bring your legs to or past failure in the constraints of a leg press much more effectively to create a hypertrophy response than you can squatting. Not to say that the squat isn't a tremendous muscle builder and hypertrophy builder, but there's a prerequisite of skill to be able to execute squats effectively and take them to where they need to be to force that hypertrophy response. Where in a leg press, you can just bite down and go.
Yeah, on the leg press, you know, you can only work the quads if you want to.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
in a squat, there's no opportunity for that. You're always going to be working, your whole torso and back and glutes, and it's unavoidable.
Yeah. And to reference the belt squat, that's such a great tool, in my opinion, to practice different means of squatting. So because you're not holding a bar and you're not out in the open and you're attached at the waist, it opens a great opportunity to set your stance closer and focus on getting your knees over your toes as much as possible. Or, if you want to focus on sitting back a bit more, you can adjust your feet relative to where the resistance is coming from, and you can sit back more into your hips because you have the handles to guide you, and you can really manipulate the pattern. And there's a lot more availability to do that within that machine than you would have out in the open. And you can then practice and rehearse and develop it there in the belt squat, and then apply it to the open chain.
Yeah, and it's less fatigue, and you can accumulate a lot of good GPP in that without draining yourself. And I think that's one of the mistakes that some powerlifters make, especially young powerlifters. I just don't think they do enough volume and don't appreciate how important it is to get the satellite cell proliferation and the mitochondria proliferation, so that they have a foundation of good energy and good muscle tissue to help build and repair the damage that's done from the heavy stuff. You need, I don't know, it's kind of like little gas stations spreading out, so that you can actually fuel and repair the tissue that's furthest from, where you're at now.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do without forcing a lot of oxygen into there.
Absolutely. I learned from Matt Wenning as well. You talk about cost and fatigue. The power lifts, the squat and deadlift in particular, both offer a ton of spinal compression. So if you're really only squatting and deadlifting as a means to develop your legs, it's you're putting a ton of actual stress on the spine. So being able to do things like a belt squat, a reverse hyper, a GHD, heavy or light with a ton of reps, is going to give you a great stimulus to the legs without the cost of more spinal compression. He actually, if I remember correctly, he tries to do 1-to-1 for every compression based movement. He tries to include some type of decompression movement as well, be it reverse hyper, GHD. I think he refers to the belt squat as being decompression, which it's not, but it doesn't load the spine. Lat pull downs, things like that, even hamstring curls, just trying to offer the spine decompressive stimulus to offset the constant compressive load placed upon the system with your squatting and deadlifting.
Yeah, well, I think it's right back to without even having to overthink it. I think we're right back to just doing more volume from a variety of angles, and getting your cardiovascular system improved, so that you can actually recover from the heavy work.
Yeah. It's always go, go, go. How can I get the most out of my training? How can I lift more, do more? How much stims can I tolerate? That's always the focus. But as you spend more and more time doing this, and you become more and more, you become stronger, and your training age increases, you realize that prioritizing recovery and sleep and eating and your active recovery work, it's just as much, if not more, of a contributor to the end result than the actual work in the gym is.
Agreed.
So to wrap up, what's next for you? Is your greatest focus this world's strongest gym competition in Vegas? What else do you have going on?
A lot, all at the same time. I'm releasing the Vertical Diet 4.0 finally this probably next month. I have it about 30 new chapters. I've been working on a book with Ben Pollock, PH Deadlift. He and I have been
Great.
we've been working together. He moved here to Vegas, and we got together, and we're actually writing Biggs University. This is for the supraphysiological who want to be Superman, larger than life, and live to tell about it. We're going to put together a pretty comprehensive book on what it's like with the polypharmacy and performance enhancing drug side of the sport. I'm also, at the same time, it seems kind of not very compatible, but I'm also writing the Vertical Kids book, which is going to be more for, kindergarten, actually conception to college, on what parents can do to help their kids realize their genetic potential. And that'll be nutrition and training and a lot of the things that I've talked about will be covered in there as well, just with specific for kids and education. So doing all those three things at the same time. And of course, we just relaunched with a new provider, the Vertical Diet nationwide meal prep, which has been a great success. And so I'm excited to keep that moving.
That sounds great. So 4.0, briefly, what are some of the additions that the 4.0 offers that weren't in the 3? If you can't, are you allowed to say?
Yeah, we expanded on a lot of topics that things people have asked me about, like PCOS, about maybe some HRT stuff, about high cholesterol quick fix kit. I have the high blood pressure, high blood sugar, but now we're into reducing LDL and ApoB and understanding what cholesterol is and how to manage it and reduce it. Host of other things that have to do kind of with general health and how the nutrition affects general health. And so we're expanding on all those chapters.
That's great. Yeah, that's it's just such a holistic thing, and it's healthcare, not sick care. It's treating the cause, with how you're feeding yourself and your lifestyle, rather than going and seeking medication to kind of band-aid all these symptoms you're experiencing, kind of getting at the ground level, which is obviously something I believe in, being a professional in this field as well. One last thing I definitely want to talk about is I started working with Merrick Health per your recommendation.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
they have been phenomenal. I can't say enough about the service they offer, how easy it is. And it's very frustrating. It's been very frustrating, myself personally and others that I work with and alongside here, getting your traditional PCP and healthcare provider to offer you the resources necessary to monitor things like blood work and food allergies and just trying to optimize things. You go to your doctor and you ask for a blood panel and they want to know why. And it's like, because I want to know what's going on. Like, I just want to know. And it's always have to jump through hoops. But after connecting with Merrick, I was connected with this woman, Erica, who's been phenomenal. She's my kind of like liaison. She's who I deal with to choose which panel is best. It's super, super easy. They work with LabCorp, and there's labs everywhere to get your labs done. You just go get your lab done. They're waiting for you and they're ready. And then the results came back much quicker than I expected. And the packet they had prepared for me to go over all of the nuances and small pieces that blood panel provided, and the guidance, the supplement recommendations. It was a packet. It was a 45-page packet. And I then had a Zoom call with Erica and a doctor. I forget his name exactly, but he was super well versed in all things that we deal with as competitive athletes and strength athletes and dieting and supplement and PED usage. It's been phenomenal, and I'm actually about to order my second panel next week. I plan to do 3 to 4 a year, just to try and optimize everything and keep myself healthy, so I can do this as long as possible. They've been a phenomenal resource.
Absolutely. I can't add to that. I can't say it any better. MerrickHealth.com. They've been extraordinary.
Before Merrick, how did you handle getting all your blood work done? Were you able to get it through PCP?
I used another provider, but it cost me twice as much, and I didn't get any of that additional information on deciphering the test, so I had to go out and learn it myself.
Yeah, because traditional, we're not coming down on traditional medicine by any means. It's just they're about general health and keeping people healthy and whatever it may be. And when they interpret someone like your or my blood panel, it's going to be different. You know, I'm 280 pounds. You know, I'm consuming 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day, and I'm putting my body through the ringer as much as possible. So things like CPK and creatinine are going to be through the roof, which may be alarming for a sedentary individual, but it's different for us. So not only having access to get the blood panels done, but having access to a resource that can interpret the blood work appropriately for us and what we're doing is just it's such a fantastic resource to finally have at our disposal. So I
Agreed, brother.
I thank you again for recommending them, because they've been fantastic.
Thanks for having me on, brother. Thanks for covering all this stuff. I'm excited. Looking forward
me
to
too.
it.
I can't wait for December, and keep me posted with any changes. And I'm going to release this episode, if not next weekend, the weekend after, so we can get the word out on this competition as soon as possible.
Okay. Appreciate it, brother.
All right, man. Be well. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you
later.
Thanks.